morning. I thought I would begin this morning by asking you all a question that Mark Zuckerberg asked me a couple of years ago. He asked me what I thought accounted for the success of Facebook. What do you all think? What do you think? You can share with your neighbors. What do you think? What's the one thing that most accounts for the success of Facebook? People. I heard people. Mark said to me that, maybe some people think it's the technology, but of course it's the people, it's the talent, the leadership at every level of the company. What he said really resonated with me because every time I encounter a high-performing organization, whether it's a team, a company, always it's because of the leadership. Now, in education, we don't spend a lot of time talking about leadership. And yet the same is really true in this sector. Let's consider a few examples of educational success. The students in this classroom are growing up in a community in Chile, a low-income community called Puente Alto, where about 15% of the students will actually enter tertiary education. And yet the 30 or so kids in this classroom entered post-secondary school at a rate of 76%, and a third of them went to Chile's top universities, despite it being a year when the schools were closed for 5 months due to student protests. Let's see. Last week, I was in California's Bay Area, where this school is, KIPP San Jose Collegiate, is working with one of the highest poverty student populations in the state. 80% of the kids are living below the poverty line. And yet, while about 20% of the kids in my country will take and pass a college placement course in the course of their high school years, 76% of the kids in this high school do. 96% of the kids in this school took a college entrance ACT test and scored higher than the national average. The kids in this classroom are engaged in a math curriculum called Math's Pathways that diagnoses their individual needs and creates a personalized curriculum. In the last 3 years since the creation of this curriculum, 25,000 kids have engaged in it. And in fact, they have made 3 times the progress in any given year as the kids using a standard math curriculum. And finally, the school system in this city, my nation's capital of Washington, D.C., is currently the fastest improving urban school system in the history of my country. About 15 years ago, the 9-year-olds in Washington, D.C. were a full 3 or 4 grades behind the average 9-year-olds in my country. Today, if you met the average 9-year-old, they're a full year ahead of where they were just 4 years ago. Now, in each and every one of these cases, the extraordinary educational success was a product of extraordinary leadership. Tomas, the teacher in the Chilean classroom, is one of the most incredible leaders I've ever met. He walked into a situation that most people would have given up on and held on to an incredible vision. People thought he was nuts, but he determined that he was going to put his kids into college and into some of the most selective universities in Chile. He convinced his kids to work harder than they had ever worked before to get there, and he went to incredible lengths to make it happen, even when it meant finding a new place to gather the kids in a chapel, despite the schools being shut down for literally 5 months. The school, KIPP San Jose Collegiate, gets the results it does because it has a school principal who's on an absolute mission to get the kids to and through college, and also has the kind of skills and leadership ability necessary to build and mobilize a team to make it happen. Math's Pathways is getting the results that it is because 2 teachers, Richard Wilson and Justin Mathis, who brought backgrounds in particle physics and engineering, started teaching and could not get over the inefficiency of the classroom, given the kind of one-size-fits-all approach that typifies our school systems, and determined to change that. And the school system in Washington, D.C. is getting the results it is because of a constellation of leaders who are really working at every level of the school system, at every level of policy, across sectors, in order to create a new day for kids. It's this insight that really leadership is the core of the solution in education that motivates all of us across the Teach for All network. I started Teach for America now a little over 25 years ago, and over the past several years, social entrepreneurs in countries around the world have launched similar initiatives. So now Teach for All is a network of independent organizations in 38 countries and growing that are enlisting their country's most promising future leaders and developing and cultivating their leadership as a force for ensuring opportunity for all children. Across Teach for All, we're committed to tackling what we call educational inequity. The fact that the privilege of children's birth, their economic circumstances, their race, their gender, and so forth, really predicts their educational and ultimately life outcomes. This is a very complex issue. It will take a whole lot of leadership to solve that problem. And yet in all of our countries and in virtually every country around the world, we're channeling our top talent, our most promising future leaders towards everything but that set of issues. We're channeling it into finance, into technology, into medicine and law, but almost never towards ensuring opportunity for the most marginalized children. That is what we're working to change at Teach for All. We do this by, first of all, going out and recruiting top recent grads, people of all different academic majors, all different career interests, very aggressively, to ask them to sign up for teaching for 2 years in the highest need communities in our country. Each year now, 40 to 50,000 people compete in the United States to channel their energy towards teaching in our urban and rural public schools, many of them from our nation's most selective colleges. Here, Teach for the Philippines selects just 10% of the applicants who step up to say that they want to do this. And while it's only 3 years old, the valedictorians, the summa cum laudes of the University of the Philippines, of Ateneo University, are part of these initial cohorts. In Mexico, 3,000 people competed for Enseña por Mexico's just 120 spots last year. In Peru, 1,500 people competed for Enseña Peru's just 60 spots. Once we've recruited these exceptional folks, we invest a great deal in their development, in their pre-service training, in their ongoing professional development during the 2 years. We do that both in pursuit of really important immediate outcomes for kids, and rigorous studies show that these teachers have a positive impact on their students' academic and socio-emotional performance. And at the same time, we're investing in them because of really important long-term objectives. Ultimately, these 2 years are foundational for a lifetime of leadership and advocacy. About 2/3 of the alumni across the network, including 2/3 of the now 50,000 alumni of Teach for America, are still working full-time in education, and many others are working from other sectors, from policy, from medicine, from law, to impact either schools or the quality of life in low-income communities. After the 2 years, we continue investing in the development, in the career paths of these alumni. Here in the Philippines, there's a partnership between the public and private sector to create government spots for the folks who have this rare experience of teaching for 2 years. And already, just 3 years in, there are 7 Teach for the Philippines fellows who have posts in the Department of Education. In Peru, 35 of the 169 alumni of Enseña Peru are working at some level of the government ministry. Ultimately, the goal is to create a leadership force of people all over the world who are working at every level of the education system, at every level of policy, and across sectors to effect the systemic changes necessary to ensure educational opportunity for all. This is working. The teacher, Tomas, is a teacher from Enseña, Chile. The school in the Bay Area is getting the results it is because of a Teach for America alum who's the principal, who leads a staff, 2/3 of whom are Teach for America alumni. Maths Pathways was started by 2 Teach for Australia fellows. And if you took all the Teach for America alumni out of Washington, D.C., You would take away the schools chancellors who've led the change over the last 8 years, the majority of the senior team and staff of the school district during that time. You would take away 20% of the school principals, including the principals of most of the fastest improving, highest performing schools in the system. You'd take away hundreds of teachers, the state commissioner for education, and the leaders of many of the NGOs supporting the change. We spend a lot of time collectively talking about how we're going to reach the new Sustainable Development Goal, quality learning for all by 2030. We talk a lot in these rooms about how we'll improve the education system's performance in our own countries, how we'll improve their rankings on the international assessments. Almost always these discussions revolve around a few things. How do we get more funding? Teacher training, how do we leverage technology? My fear is that we aren't putting nearly enough emphasis on how to ensure that we have the leadership capacity to ensure that all those other good investments actually work. In every other sector, we spend a lot of energy talking about how to develop the leadership we need to get the results we're going for. We have to do the same in education. I've actually come to believe that we can realize this vision in our lifetime. Tomas shows us that it's possible in his classroom. We're seeing it's possible not only in whole classrooms, but in whole schools like KIPP San Jose Collegiate. Richard Wilson and Justin Mathis are showing that we can make this happen across whole schools. And in Washington, D.C., we're showing that we can make it happen even in some of the most entrenched situations in countries. The only question is whether enough of our country's most promising, most capable future leaders will step up and decide to make this happen. So as I leave you today, I want to ask each of you to consider what you can do to ensure that they do. Thank you so much.
Health and education for the future. Our